Evelyn Mercer's hands wouldn't stop shaking as the sheriff leaned across his desk, voice low and final. Ma'am, the man you married doesn't exist. That proxy certificate? It's legal, binding, and it ties you to someone the law won't go near. Outside, wind screamed through Black Hollow's frozen streets. She'd fled New York to escape one nightmare, a forced marriage to her stepbrother's business partner, only to discover she'd signed herself over to something worse, a mountain trapper, a rumored killer, a ghost with a real name, Cade Grayson, and he was waiting for her at the edge of the wilderness, whether she came willingly or not. If you want to see how far Evelyn's choice takes her, and whether she survives what's waiting in those mountains, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Black Hollow just after dawn, and Evelyn Mercer stepped into air so cold it felt like swallowing glass. Her boots hit frozen mud. She steadied herself against the coach's side, leather gloves gripping the doorframe, and forced herself to look at the town that was supposed to be her salvation. Black Hollow wasn't a town. It was a scar. A single dirt road cutting between wooden buildings that leaned like broken teeth. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, desperate threads. The saloon's windows were cracked. The general store's sign hung crooked, and everywhere, on porches, in doorways, leaning against hitching posts, men watched her with the kind of silence that made her skin crawl. She wasn't welcome here. She'd known that the moment the driver had gone quiet 50 miles back. "Miss?" The driver's voice came from above, gruff and impatient. "Your trunk!" Evelyn stepped aside as he dropped her single battered trunk into the mud with a thud that felt too final. Everything she owned. 2 dresses, a winter coat, undergarments, her mother's silver hairbrush, and the envelope containing the marriage certificate that had brought her 2,000 miles from New York into this frozen hellscape. The driver didn't meet her eyes. "Sheriff's office is that way." He jerked his chin toward a squat building with bars on the windows. "Good luck, ma'am." Then he climbed back onto the coach, snapped the reins, and left her standing alone in the street. Evelyn forced herself to breathe. She was 23 years old. She had $60 sewn into the lining of her coat. And she had no idea what she was doing. 6 months ago, her father had died. Heart failure, the doctor said, but Evelyn knew better. Richard Mercer had worked himself to death trying to keep his shipping business afloat, while his new wife, Evelyn's stepmother, Margaret, bled the accounts dry to fund her son's gambling debts. When the creditors came, there was nothing left, except Evelyn. Margaret's son, Thomas, had made his intentions clear within a week of the funeral. He'd arranged a marriage to Jonathan Aldridge, a railroad tycoon twice Evelyn's age, with a reputation for cruelty and 3 dead wives. The wedding was set for October. Evelyn had 2 choices, marry Aldridge or disappear. She chose disappearance. A classified ad in a frontier newspaper had seemed like madness at first. Rancher-seeking wife, proxy marriage available. Modest home, honest work, no questions asked. But the letters that followed, carefully written, respectful, promising safety, and a quiet life, had felt like a lifeline. She'd signed the proxy certificate in a New York courthouse with a judge who didn't care and a witness who looked bored. Legally, she was Mrs. Cade Grayson. She'd never seen his face. Now she was here, and the silence in the street was getting worse. Evelyn picked up her trunk, heavier than she remembered, and started walking toward the sheriff's office. Mud sucked at her boots, her breath fogged in the air. Behind her, she heard a door creak open. Footsteps. Low voices. She didn't look back. The sheriff's office was warmer, but not by much. A pot-bellied stove radiated weak heat in the corner. The man behind the desk didn't stand when she entered. Sheriff William Hollister was in his 50s, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that measured her the way a butcher measures meat. He leaned back in his chair, fingers laced across his stomach, and waited. Evelyn set her trunk down. "I'm looking for Cade Grayson." Hollister's expression didn't change. "You're the bride." It wasn't a question. "Yes." She reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope. "I have the certificate. The marriage was finalized by proxy in New York 3 weeks ago. I was told he'd meet me here." Hollister didn't take the envelope. He just stared at her, and something cold shifted in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "do you know who Cade Grayson is?" Evelyn's throat tightened. He's a rancher. He wrote to me. He said, he's not a rancher. The words hit her like a fist. Hollister leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Cade Grayson is a trapper. Lives up in the Iron Fang Range, 20 miles north of here. Hasn't set foot in this town in over a year. The man you married, if you can call it that, is the kind of person decent folk cross the street to avoid. Evelyn's hands clenched around the envelope. That's not... He wrote to me. He said, I don't care what he said. Hollister's voice was flat. I care about what he is. And what he is, ma'am, is dangerous. Dangerous how? Hollister stood. He was taller than she'd expected, broad-shouldered, and when he moved around the desk, Evelyn had to fight the urge to step back. 3 years ago, Hollister said, a freight company tried to run a route through the high pass near Grayson's territory. He ran them off, burned 2 wagons, hospitalized 4 men, said the route was his. Evelyn's stomach turned. Why wasn't he arrested? Because nobody wanted to ride up there and try. Hollister's gaze was steady. The man's built like a damn bear, ma'am. He's got scars all over him, knife fights, animal attacks, who knows what else. People around here say he's half savage. Some say he killed men during the war and never stopped. That's... Evelyn's voice cracked. That's just rumors. Maybe. Hollister shrugged. Or maybe you married a man who doesn't belong in civilized society. Either way, that certificate makes you his legal wife. If he wants you up in those mountains, there's not a damn thing the law can do to stop him. Evelyn felt the room tilt. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The letters had been kind. They'd talked about a ranch, about horses, about a quiet life away from the chaos of the East. Cade Grayson had written about needing a partner, someone who could handle frontier life but deserved better than loneliness. He'd never mentioned danger. He'd never mentioned violence. Where is he now? Evelyn's voice was barely audible. Hollister nodded toward the window. Probably watching us right now. Evelyn turned. Through the frosted glass, she could see the street, the same men loitering near the saloon, the same crooked buildings. And then, at the far end of the road, half hidden in the shadow of the trading post, a figure. Tall. Impossibly tall. He wore a heavy fur coat that made his shoulders look enormous. Dark hair fell past his collar. And even from a distance, even through the distortion of the glass, Evelyn could see his eyes. Storm gray. Unblinking. Fixed on the sheriff's office. On her. Her breath stopped. That's him, Hollister said quietly. That's your husband. Evelyn couldn't move. The man across the street didn't move either. He just stood there, patient and still, like a wolf waiting for prey to run. You've got a choice, ma'am. Hollister's voice was almost gentle now. You can walk out there, get in a wagon with him, and disappear into those mountains. Or you can stay here, and I'll wire New York. Tell them the marriage was a mistake. Get you on the next stage east. Evelyn's mind was screaming. Go back to New York. Back to Thomas. Back to Jonathan Aldridge and the wedding she'd fled. Or walk toward the man in the street who might be everything the sheriff said. And worse, her hands were shaking again. If I go back, she whispered, they'll force me into a marriage I don't want. I'll have no say, no choice. I'll spend the rest of my life as someone's property. Hollister was quiet for a long moment, then he sighed. At least you know what Aldridge is. You don't know what's waiting for you up in Iron Fang. Evelyn closed her eyes. He was right, she didn't know, but she knew what the alternative was. When she opened her eyes again, the man across the street was still there, still watching. She picked up her trunk. Thank you, Sheriff, she said quietly, but I made a choice when I signed that certificate. I'm going to see it through. Hollister didn't try to stop her. The cold hit her again the moment she stepped outside. The men on the street went silent. Evelyn forced herself to keep walking, boots crunching through frozen mud, trunk handle cutting into her palm. She stopped 10 feet away from him. Up close, Cade Grayson was worse than she'd imagined. He stood at least 6'4", maybe taller, with a frame that looked like it had been carved out of stone. The fur coat he wore, wolf pelt, she realized, only made him look more massive. His face was hard, all sharp angles and rough edges, with a scar running from his left temple down to his jaw. His hair was dark, tangled, too long, and his eyes were the coldest thing she'd ever seen. He didn't smile, didn't speak, Just looked at her the way a man looks at something he's bought and paid for. Evelyn's heart was slamming against her ribs. Say something, she thought. Say anything. But her throat wouldn't work. Finally, Cade moved. He reached down, picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing, and turned toward a wagon parked at the edge of the street. Then he stopped, looked back at her, waited. It took Evelyn a moment to understand. He was giving her a choice. She could walk to the wagon, or she could walk away. Her legs felt like they were made of water, but she moved. One step, then another. She climbed into the wagon. Cade set her trunk in the back, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The wagon lurched forward. Black Hollow fell away behind them. Ungis. They rode in silence for over an hour. The road, if it could even be called that, cut north through a landscape that looked like the end of the world. Bare trees clawed at a sky the color of iron. Snow covered the ground in uneven patches, gray and frozen. The temperature kept dropping. Evelyn kept her hands tucked under her arms, trying to conserve warmth. Her coat wasn't thick enough. The wind cut through the wool like it wasn't even there. Beside her, Cade didn't seem to notice the cold. He drove the wagon with the kind of ease that came from years of practice, reins loose in his hands, gaze fixed on the trail ahead. He hadn't said a single word since they'd left town. Hadn't looked at her, hadn't acknowledged her presence at all. Evelyn's fear was starting to give way to something sharper. Anger. "Are you going to tell me where we're going?" she said finally. Cade's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. "Or are you just planning to drag me into the wilderness without a single word of explanation?" Still nothing. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. "I signed a legal document. I came 2,000 miles based on letters you wrote. The least you can do is—" "I didn't write those letters." His voice was rough, low, like he didn't use it often. Evelyn went still. Cade didn't look at her. "My brother wrote them. Rowan. He thought I needed a wife, thought it'd—" He stopped, shook his head. "Doesn't matter. You're here now." Evelyn's chest went tight. "Your brother wrote the letters, sent the ad, handled the proxy paperwork." Cade's tone was flat. "I didn't know about any of it until 3 weeks ago when he showed me the certificate." "And you didn't think to—" Evelyn's voice cracked. "You didn't think to send word? To tell me the truth? Would you have come?" The question hung in the frozen air. Evelyn didn't answer. Because he was right. If she'd known the letters were fake, if she'd known the rancher didn't exist, she never would have signed the certificate, and she'd be on her way to marry Jonathan Aldridge right now. "The certificate's legal," Cade said. "Judge in Missoula confirmed it. You're my wife, whether either of us planned it or not." Evelyn felt sick. "So what happens now?" Her voice was barely audible. Cade finally looked at her. His eyes were still cold, but there was something else there now, something that might have been exhaustion. "We go to the cabin," he said. "You stay the winter. Spring comes, I'll take you to Missoula. You can file for annulment, head east, do whatever you want. Until then—" He turned back to the trail. "You're safer with me than you are anywhere else." "Safer?" Evelyn's laugh was bitter. "The sheriff said you're dangerous." "I am." The bluntness of it hit her like a slap. Cade's hands tightened on the reins. "But I've never hurt a woman, and I'm not going to start with you." Evelyn wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe this was all some terrible misunderstanding, that the man beside her wasn't the monster the town whispered about. But the scar on his face told a different story. The way he moved, controlled, deliberate, like violence was always an option, told a different story. She didn't know what to believe. The wagon kept moving. They reached the cabin just before nightfall. It wasn't a cabin, it was a fortress. Set into the base of a rocky ridge, the structure was built from massive logs chinked with mud and moss. The roof was steeply pitched to shed snow. Small windows, too small for a man to climb through, were shuttered tight. A stone chimney rose from the center, smoke already curling from the top. Rowan must have lit the fire earlier. Cade brought the wagon to a stop, set the brake, and climbed down. He pulled Evelyn's trunk from the back, carried it to the door, and pushed it open with his shoulder. Evelyn stayed where she was. The mountains loomed around her, dark and silent. The trees were so thick she couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. The temperature was still dropping. If she ran now, she'd be dead by morning. Cade reappeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just waited. Evelyn climbed down from the wagon. Inside, the cabin was warmer, barely. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting uneven light across rough wooden walls. There was a table, 2 chairs, a shelf stacked with supplies, and in the corner a bed covered in furs. One bed. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Cade followed her gaze. "You take the bed. I'll sleep on the floor." Evelyn's voice failed her. "There's food in the chest." Cade moved to the hearth, crouched down, and added another log to the fire. "Water's outside. Privy's 20 feet north. Don't go farther than that after dark." "Why not?" "Wolves." The word made her skin crawl. Cade straightened. "I'm heading out to check the trap lines. I'll be back before midnight. Bar the door after I leave." "Wait." Evelyn's voice was sharper than she intended. "You're leaving me here alone?" Cade looked at her, and for the first time she saw something almost like regret in his eyes. "You wanted a choice," he said quietly. "This is it. You can stay here, stay warm, stay safe, or you can try to leave. But if you leave, you won't survive the night." Then he turned and walked out. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. Evelyn stood frozen in the center of the cabin, heart pounding, mind racing. This was insane. She was alone in a stranger's cabin in the middle of the wilderness with no way out and no idea if he was telling the truth about anything. But as the silence stretched and the cold seeped in through the cracks in the walls, Evelyn realized something. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicking. She was angry. Angry at Rowan for the deception. Angry at Cade for going along with it. Angry at herself for being desperate enough to sign a proxy marriage certificate without asking more questions. But anger was better than fear. Anger kept you moving. Evelyn crossed to the door and slid the heavy wooden bar into place. Then she turned, surveyed the cabin, and started making a plan. Check. Cade didn't come back at midnight. He came back 2 hours later, and when he pushed the door open, Evelyn was still awake. She'd spent the time exploring the cabin, taking inventory. The food chest held dried meat, beans, flour, coffee, and salt. The shelves had ammunition, rope, knives, and medical supplies. Bandages, a needle, and thread. A bottle of whiskey that was probably for wounds, not drinking. There were furs piled in the corner, traps hanging from nails on the wall, and a rifle propped beside the door. Everything about the space screamed survival. Cade stepped inside, shook snow from his coat, and stopped when he saw her sitting at the table. "You're still up," he said. "I had questions." Cade closed the door, barred it, and moved to the fire. He crouched down, warming his hands, and didn't look at her. "Ask. How long have you lived here?" 5 years. "Alone?" "Mostly." "What does mostly mean?" Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Rowan comes up sometimes, stays a few weeks, leaves again. He doesn't like the isolation." "But you do." "I don't mind it." Evelyn leaned forward. "Why?" Cade finally looked at her. His face was unreadable. "Because people are worse than the wilderness." The words were simple, but the weight behind them made Evelyn's chest tighten. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. Cade stood. "It's late. You should sleep." "I'm not tired." "Then pretend." He moved to the far corner, pulled a pile of furs onto the floor, and lay down with his back to her. The conversation was over. Evelyn sat at the table for another hour, watching the fire burn down, listening to the wind howl outside. Then she finally climbed into the bed, pulled the furs around her, and closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come. But somewhere in the early hours of the morning, as the cabin settled into silence and the cold pressed against the walls, Evelyn realized something. For the first time in 6 months, she wasn't afraid of being dragged back to New York. She was afraid of what staying in this place might turn her into. The days blurred together. Cade left before dawn every morning to check trap lines, chop wood, or hunt. Evelyn stayed in the cabin, learning how to keep the fire going, how to melt snow for water, how to cook beans and dried meat into something edible. They spoke rarely. When they did, it was functional. "We need more wood. The roof's leaking near the chimney. There's a cougar near the south ridge. Don't go that way." Evelyn hated it. Not the work, not the isolation, the silence. Because silence gave her too much time to think. About New York, about her father's funeral, about Thomas's smug smile when he told her the wedding to Aldridge was already arranged, about the choice she'd made, and about the man who barely acknowledged her existence. 2 weeks in, she snapped. Cade had just come back from the trap lines, snow crusted on his coat, a rabbit hanging from his belt. He dropped it on the table without a word and moved toward the fire. Do you ever plan to have an actual conversation with me? Evelyn's voice was sharp. Cade stopped, turned. About what? Anything. Evelyn stood. We're stuck here together for the entire winter. We're legally married, and you act like I'm not even here. You want me to talk? Yes. About what? Cade's tone didn't change. The weather? The traps? How many wolves I saw today? I want to know who you are. Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. I want to know why the sheriff called you dangerous. I want to know why you live up here alone like you're hiding from the world. Cade's jaw tightened. I want to know, Evelyn continued, voice shaking now, if I made the worst mistake of my life coming here. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Cade said, very quietly, You did. Evelyn's breath caught. Cade turned back to the fire. I'm not a good man, Evelyn. I've killed people. I've done things I can't take back. And yeah, I'm hiding up here because if I go back down to that town, someone's going to try to put a bullet in me. Maybe they'll succeed. Maybe they won't. Either way, you don't want to be tied to me. Then why didn't you tell Rowan to stop? Evelyn's voice cracked. Why didn't you refuse the marriage? Cade didn't answer. Evelyn crossed the cabin, stood in front of him, forced him to look at her. Why? His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something raw in them. Because I'm tired, he said. The words hung between them. Tired of what? Everything. Cade's voice was rough. Fighting, running, being alone. I thought... He stopped, shook his head. Doesn't matter what I thought. You're here. I'm not sending you back. And when spring comes, you'll leave. That's how this ends. Evelyn stared at him. Then, without thinking, she said, What if I don't want to leave? Cade went still. What if... Evelyn continued, voice steadier now. I want to stay. You don't. You don't know what I want. Cade's hands clenched into fists. Evelyn, I didn't come here because I thought it would be easy. Her voice was fierce now. I came here because I was out of options. But I'm still here. I'm still standing, and I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Why? Because you've killed people? Evelyn stepped closer. So has half the frontier. Because you're scarred and angry, and you live in the middle of nowhere? That doesn't make you a monster. That makes you human. Cade's eyes were locked on hers now, and the air between them felt electric. You don't know me, he said, voice low and rough. Then let me. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Cade turned away, shoulders tight, and walked out of the cabin into the snow. Evelyn stood alone by the fire, heart pounding, hands shaking. She'd pushed too hard, but she didn't regret it. That night, Cade didn't come back until after midnight. When he finally walked through the door, snow caked on his coat and exhaustion written across his face, Evelyn was waiting at the table. He stopped when he saw her. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I shouldn't have... I was a soldier. Cade's voice cut through hers, flat and tired. Cavalry. Fought in the war. Did things I'm not proud of because I was told to. And when it was over, I came back here and realized I didn't know how to be anything else. Evelyn went still. Cade didn't look at her. He just stood by the door staring at the floor. The scar on my face? Got that from a knife fight in a mining camp. The one on my ribs? Ambush in the mountains. I've hurt people who deserved it and people who didn't, and the only reason I'm still alive is because I'm meaner and harder to kill than anyone who's tried. He finally looked up, and his eyes were hollow. That's who I am, Evelyn. That's the man you married. Evelyn stood slowly. Then she crossed the cabin, stopped in front of him, and did something she'd never planned to do. She took his hand. Cade froze. Her fingers were small against his scarred, calloused palm, but she didn't let go. Thank you, she said softly. For telling me. Cade stared at her like she'd lost her mind. I'm not afraid of you, Evelyn repeated, and I'm not leaving. She let go of his hand, turned, and climbed into bed. Behind her, Cade stood in the center of the cabin for a long time. Then he moved to the fire, lay down on the furs, and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the mountain man didn't feel completely alone. The blizzard hit 3 days later. Evelyn woke to a sound like the world was tearing itself apart. Wind screamed against the cabin walls with enough force to make the logs creak. Snow hammered the shutters in violent bursts. The temperature had dropped so low that frost crept across the inside of the windows in jagged white patterns. She sat up, pulling furs around her shoulders, and looked toward the fire. Cade was already awake. He stood by the door, one hand pressed against the wood, listening. "How bad is it?" Evelyn's voice was rough from sleep. "Bad." Cade didn't turn around. "We're not leaving this cabin for at least 2 days, maybe 3. Evelyn's stomach tightened. She'd lived through New York winters, but this was different. This was the kind of cold that killed people. Cade moved to the food chest, started pulling out supplies. "We need to ration. Storm like this, we could be snowed in for a week." "A week?" "Maybe longer." He set dried meat and beans on the table, counted them out with the precision of someone who'd done this before. "I've got traps out. Can't check them until it clears, so whatever we've got here, that's what we're working with." Evelyn climbed out of bed, bare feet hitting the cold floor. She crossed to the table, looked at the meager pile of food, and felt her chest go tight. "Is this enough?" Cade's jaw worked. "It'll have to be." The first day wasn't terrible. They stayed close to the fire, rationed the food carefully, and avoided each other as much as 2 people could in a space barely 20 feet across. Cade sharpened knives, mended a torn fur coat, cleaned his rifle. Evelyn read from the single book she'd brought from New York, a collection of essays she'd read a dozen times already, and tried not to think about how trapped they were. But by the second day, the walls started closing in. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten worse. Snow piled against the door so high that when Cade forced it open to check, the drift came up to his waist. He'd had to dig them out just to reach the woodpile, and even then the wind was strong enough to knock him sideways. Evelyn watched from the doorway, heart in her throat, as he hauled logs back through the snow. His face was raw from the cold, his hands shaking despite the gloves. When he finally got back inside, he dropped the wood by the hearth and stood there, breathing hard. "You're hurt," Evelyn said. "I'm fine." "Your hands are bleeding." Cade looked down. The gloves had torn. Blood seeped through the leather where the rough bark had cut into his palms. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." Evelyn grabbed the medical kit from the shelf, brought it to the table. "Sit down." Cade didn't move. "Sit," Evelyn repeated, sharper this time. He sat. Evelyn pulled off his gloves carefully, wincing at the damage. The cuts weren't deep, but they were raw and dirty. She poured whiskey over a cloth, pressed it against his palm. Cade hissed through his teeth. "Sorry," Evelyn muttered. She cleaned the wounds methodically, the way her mother had taught her years ago. Wrap the bandage tight enough to stop the bleeding, but not so tight it cuts off circulation. Tie it off clean. When she finished, Cade flexed his fingers, testing the wrapping. "You're good at that," he said quietly. "My mother was a nurse during the cholera outbreak in New York." Evelyn's voice was distant. "She taught me before she died." Cade looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "How old were you?" 12. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I'm sorry." Evelyn shrugged. It was a long time ago. But the weight of it still sat in her chest like a stone. By the 3rd day, the food was running low. Cade portioned out what was left, barely enough beans and dried meat for 2 more days if they stretched it. The coffee was gone, the flour was almost gone, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. Evelyn sat at the table, staring at her half-empty plate, and tried not to panic. "What happens if the storm doesn't break?" she asked. Cade was standing by the window, looking out at the wall of white beyond the shutters. "Then I go out anyway." "That's insane. It's survival." He turned to face her. "There's game out there. Deer, elk, maybe a mountain goat if I'm lucky. But I can't get to them if I'm stuck in here." "You'll freeze to death." "Maybe." Cade's tone was flat. "Or maybe I'll come back with enough meat to keep us alive until spring. Either way, we don't have a choice." Evelyn's hands clenched around her fork. "There's always a choice." "Not up here." Cade moved back to the fire, crouched down, added the last log.
Up here. You do what you have to do, or you die. That's it. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be another way, but she'd been in the mountains long enough now to know he was right. That night, the temperature dropped so low that the fire barely made a difference.
Evelyn lay in bed, wrapped in every fur she could find, and still couldn't stop shivering. Her teeth chattered, her fingers were numb, and no matter how close she moved to the hearth, the cold seeped into her bones. Across the cabin, Cade was on the floor, motionless. Too motionless. "Cade?" Evelyn's voice was barely audible. No response. Her heart lurched. She threw off the furs, stumbled across the cabin, and dropped to her knees beside him. "Cade?" She shook his shoulder. "Cade? Wake up." He stirred barely. His face was pale, his lips faintly blue. Hypothermia. Evelyn's mind raced. She'd read about it, heard stories from travelers who'd lost fingers and toes to frostbite. If his core temperature dropped too low, she didn't let herself finish the thought. Instead, she grabbed every fur in the cabin, piled them on top of him, and then, because there was no other option, she climbed under the pile with him. Cade's eyes opened, unfocused. "What are you—" "Shut up!" Evelyn pressed herself against his side, trying to share what little body heat she had. "You're freezing. So am I. This is the only way we both survived the night." Cade tried to move away. "Evelyn, I said shut up." Her voice cracked. "I didn't come 2,000 miles just to watch you die on the floor because you're too stubborn to admit you need help." He went still. Slowly, carefully, his arm came around her shoulders. They lay there in the dark, tangled together under the furs, and waited for morning. Evelyn didn't sleep. She could feel Cade's heartbeat against her cheek, slow and steady, could feel the rise and fall of his chest, and somewhere in the long frozen hours before dawn, she realized something. She trusted him. It didn't make sense. She barely knew him. He was rough and scarred and dangerous, and the whole town thought he was a killer. But lying there in the dark, with the storm howling outside and the cold trying to kill them both, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. Cade Grayson would die before he let anything happen to her. When morning came, the storm had finally started to break. The wind was quieter. The snow had slowed to scattered flurries, and when Cade pushed the door open, the drift outside was manageable. He stood in the doorway, staring out at the white wilderness, and Evelyn saw the calculation in his eyes. "You're going hunting," she said. "Yeah." "How long will you be gone?" "However long it takes." Cade pulled on his coat, checked his rifle, loaded extra ammunition into his pockets. "Could be a few hours, could be all day. Don't open the door for anyone but me. There's no one else out here." "You'd be surprised." Cade's tone was grim. "Bar the door, keep the fire going. I'll be back before dark." Evelyn followed him to the door. "Cade?" He stopped, looked back. "Be careful." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or something softer, but it was gone before she could name it. "Always am." Then he stepped into the snow and disappeared into the trees. Evelyn barred the door, fed the fire, and waited. Hours passed. She tried to read, tried to keep busy, but her mind kept circling back to the same thought. What if he doesn't come back? What if something happens out there? A fall, an animal, another storm, and she's stuck here alone with no idea how to survive? She forced herself to breathe. Cade knew these mountains. He'd been living here for 5 years. He'd survived worse than this. He'd come back. He had to. The sun was starting to set when Evelyn heard the sound. Not Cade's footsteps. Something else. A low guttural growl that made every hair on her body stand up. She moved to the window, pressed her face against the gap in the shutters, and looked out. 3 wolves stood at the edge of the clearing. They were massive, bigger than any dog she'd ever seen, with gray fur matted with snow and eyes that gleamed in the fading light. One of them stepped closer to the cabin, sniffing the air. Evelyn's breath stopped. The wolf's head swung toward the door. She backed away from the window, heart slamming, and grabbed the rifle from beside the hearth. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She'd never fired a gun in her life, but she'd watched Cade load it, watched him check the chamber, cock the hammer. She could do this. The wolf outside let out another growl, closer now. Evelyn moved to the door, pressed her back against the wall, and waited. If it tried to get in, If it broke through the shutters or clawed through the wood, she'd fire. She'd have to. The silence stretched. Then suddenly, a gunshot exploded from the trees. The wolves scattered, disappearing into the forest in a blur of gray fur and snapping branches. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. She set the rifle down with shaking hands, unbarred the door, and threw it open. Cade was crossing the clearing, rifle in one hand, a deer carcass slung over his shoulder. Blood stained the snow behind him. He stopped when he saw her in the doorway. "You okay?" His voice was rough. Evelyn nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Cade's eyes flicked to the rifle on the floor behind her. "You were going to shoot them." "If I had to." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he walked past her into the cabin, dropped the deer by the hearth, and turned to face her. "You did good," he said quietly. Evelyn's chest tightened. "I didn't do anything." "You didn't panic. You armed yourself. You were ready." Cade's gaze was steady. "That's more than most people would have done." Evelyn wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He meant it. That night, they had fresh meat for the first time in days. Cade butchered the deer with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, setting aside cuts for smoking, rendering fat for cooking, saving the hide for tanning. Evelyn watched, trying to memorize the process, and when he handed her a knife and told her to help, she didn't hesitate. Her hands were clumsy at first. She cut too deep in one place, not deep enough in another. But Cade didn't criticize. He just adjusted her grip, showed her the angle, and let her try again. By the time they finished, Evelyn's hands were covered in blood and her arms ached, but there was meat hanging from the rafters and a sense of accomplishment sitting warm in her chest. "You're a fast learner," Cade said as he cleaned his knife. Evelyn looked at her hands. "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice." Cade's voice was quiet. "You could have stayed useless, waited for me to do everything. Most people would have." "I'm not most people." Cade's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "No," he said, "you're not." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Cade taught her how to set snares, how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to shoot the rifle without flinching. Evelyn taught him how to mend clothes properly, how to make coffee stretch further, how to organize the supply shelves so things were easier to find. They still didn't talk much. But the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was companionable. And then one morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of voices outside. She sat up, heart pounding, and looked toward the door. Cade was already on his feet, rifle in hand, moving toward the window. "Who is it?" Evelyn whispered. Cade's jaw was tight. "Trouble." He moved to the door, unbarred it, and stepped outside. Evelyn grabbed her coat and followed. 3 men stood in the clearing. The one in front was tall and lean, with a cruel smile and a deputy's badge pinned to his coat. The other 2 looked like hired muscle, thick-necked, mean-eyed, the kind of men who enjoyed hurting people. The deputy's smile widened when he saw Evelyn. "Well, well," he said. "So the rumors are true. Grayson really did get himself a wife." Cade's voice was cold. "State your business, Kern." Deputy Kern's eyes slid over Evelyn in a way that made her skin crawl. "Just checking in, making sure everything's legal up here." "It's legal." "Is it?" Kern took a step closer. "See, we heard some interesting things. Heard you married this little lady by proxy. Heard she came all the way from New York without knowing what she was getting into." His gaze locked on Evelyn. "That true, sweetheart?" Evelyn's hands clenched. "I knew exactly what I was doing." "Did you?" Kern's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Grayson here tricked you, dragged you up to his cabin in the middle of nowhere. That's called kidnapping, ma'am, and kidnapping's a crime." "I came willingly." "Sure you did." Kern glanced at one of the men behind him. "What do you think, boys? Think she looks willing?" The men laughed. Cade's rifle shifted, just slightly. Kern noticed. His hand dropped to the gun at his hip. "Easy now, Grayson. We're just having a conversation." "Conversation's over." Cade's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "Get off my land." Kern's smile faded. "Your land? You don't own this mountain." "I do now." Cade took a step forward. "And if you're still standing here in 10 seconds, I'm going to make you regret it." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Kern's hand twitched toward his gun. Evelyn didn't think. She grabbed Cade's arm, stepped between him and the deputies and said, "We're married, legally. The certificate was filed in Missoula. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the judge." Kern stared at her, then he laughed. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." He looked at Cade. "But guts won't keep you safe up here forever, Grayson. You remember that." He turned, jerked his head at the other men, and they mounted their horses. As they rode away, Kern called back over his shoulder, "Enjoy the winter, sweetheart. Hope it's worth it." Evelyn stood frozen until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the trees. Then her legs gave out. Cade caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy," he said, voice low. "You're okay." "I'm not okay." Evelyn's voice was shaking. "Those men, they weren't going to do anything." Cade's arms were solid around her. "Not with me here." "What if you hadn't been here?" Cade's jaw tightened. "I was." Evelyn pulled back, looked up at him. "Why did they come? What do they want?" Cade didn't answer right away. Then he said, very quietly, "They want me gone." "Why?" "Because I know too much." Cade's eyes were dark. "Kern and the sheriff, they're running something. I don't know what yet, but it's dirty, and they don't want witnesses." Evelyn's chest went tight. "Then why don't you leave? Go somewhere they can't find you?" "Because this is my home," Cade's voice was fierce, "and I'm done running." He turned, walked back toward the cabin. Evelyn followed, mind racing. She'd thought the mountain was dangerous because of the cold, the wolves, the isolation. She hadn't realized the real danger was human. That night, Cade didn't sleep. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the darkness. Evelyn lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and knew things had changed. The fragile peace they'd built was cracking, and when it finally shattered, blood was going to follow. 2 days after the deputies left, Cade started disappearing for longer stretches. He'd leave before dawn and come back after dark, exhausted and covered in snow. When Evelyn asked where he'd been, he gave one-word answers: trap lines, hunting, scouting. She knew he was lying, or at least not telling her everything. The tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to the windows, the fact that he now slept with the rifle within arm's reach, it all pointed to something deeper, something he wasn't ready to tell her. On the third night, Evelyn decided she was done waiting. Cade came through the door just past midnight, snow-crusted on his coat, moving like every muscle hurt. He shrugged off the fur coat, hung it by the fire, and started toward the corner where he slept. "Where were you?" Evelyn's voice cut through the silence. Cade stopped. "Out." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Evelyn stood from this table, crossed her arms. "You've been gone for 16 hours. You didn't check the trap lines. I checked them myself this afternoon. You didn't hunt. There's no blood on you, no game. So where the hell were you?" Cade turned slowly. His face was unreadable in the firelight. "You went to the trap lines alone?" "Don't change the subject." "Evelyn, those lines are 2 miles through rough terrain. If you'd gotten hurt, aqua." "I didn't get hurt." Her voice was sharp. "And I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting every second. I can handle myself." "I know you can." "Then stop treating me like I can't." Evelyn stepped closer, anger rising in her chest. "Stop disappearing without explanation. Stop keeping secrets. We're supposed to be in this together, aren't we?" Cade's jaw tightened. "You don't want to be in this. That's not your decision to make." "Yes, it is." Cade's voice went hard. "You're here because you had nowhere else to go. I get that. But you don't owe me anything, Evelyn. When spring comes, you're leaving. Until then, my job is to keep you alive. That's it." "Your job?" Evelyn's laugh was bitter. "Is that what I am to you? A job?" Cade didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Then Evelyn said very quietly, "I thought we were past this." "Past what?" "The part where you pretend you don't give a damn about anything." Her voice shook. "The part where you act like you're some kind of monster who doesn't deserve basic human connection." Cade's hands clenched into fists. "Maybe I don't." "Bullshit." Evelyn stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into his face. "You think I haven't noticed? The way you make sure I eat before you do? The way you give me the warmest furs and sleep on the floor even when it's freezing? The way you taught me to shoot so I could protect myself if something happened to you? That's not nothing." Evelyn's eyes burned.
That's you caring whether I live or die. So don't stand there and tell me this is just a job.
Cade stared at her, something raw and painful flickering across his face. Then he turned away. You should get some sleep. Cade, I said get some sleep. His voice was rough, final. Evelyn stood there for another moment, fists clenched, throat tight. Then she climbed into bed and turned her back to him. But she didn't sleep, and neither did he. The next morning, everything changed. Evelyn woke to find Cade already gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty cabin and a fire burning low in the hearth. She fed the fire, made coffee from the dregs they had left, and tried not to think about the fight. 3 hours passed, then 4. By noon, the knot in Evelyn's stomach had grown into full-blown dread. Something was wrong. Cade never stayed out this long without telling her. Even when he was angry, even when they weren't speaking, he always made sure she knew when he'd be back. Evelyn pulled on her coat, grabbed the rifle, and stepped outside. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of more snow. The trees were silent, no birds, no wind, just an oppressive quiet that made her skin crawl. She started walking toward the trap lines, following the path Cade had shown her weeks ago. Her boots crunched through the snow. Her breath fogged in the frozen air. And with every step, the dread grew worse. She found the first trap empty. The second was sprung but empty. The third, blood. Evelyn's heart stopped. Dark red stained the snow in a wide pool, already starting to freeze. The trap had been triggered, but whatever had been caught was gone, dragged away judging by the furrow in the snow leading into the trees. Evelyn's hands shook as she raised the rifle. Cade? Her voice came out hoarse. Cade, if you're out here... A sound, faint, distant, a low groan. Evelyn ran. She crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at her coat, snow flying up around her boots. The sound came again, closer now, and she followed it into a small clearing ringed by pine trees. And there he was. Cade lay crumpled against the base of a tree, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. His face was pale, lips tinged blue, eyes half closed. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside him. Oh my God, Cade! Cade, look at me! His eyes opened, unfocused. Evelyn? I'm here. Her hands hovered over the wound, shaking. What happened? Who did this? Ambush. Cade's voice was weak. 2 men, waiting near the ridge, didn't see them until... He broke off, coughing. Blood flecked his lips. Evelyn's mind raced. She had to get him back to the cabin, had to stop the bleeding, had to... Can you stand? Cade tried, got halfway up before his legs gave out. Evelyn caught him, staggered under his weight. He was too heavy, too tall. But she locked her knees, got her shoulder under his arm, and started dragging him back toward the cabin. It took forever. Every few feet, Cade's weight would shift and she'd nearly collapse. His breathing grew more labored. Blood soaked through his shirt, dripped onto the snow, left a trail behind them. Evelyn's arms screamed, her back felt like it was breaking. But she didn't stop, she couldn't stop. By the time they reached the cabin, her vision was blurring and her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. She kicked the door open, hauled Cade inside, and lowered him onto the furs by the fire. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. Cade? Evelyn's voice cracked. Stay with me. Do you hear me? Stay with me. No response. Evelyn's hands were shaking as she grabbed the medical kit, dumped it on the floor beside him. Bandages, whiskey, needle and thread. She'd done this once before, on his hands, minor cuts. This wasn't minor. She pulled his shirt open. The wound was high on his left side, just below the ribs. A bullet hole. The entry wound was small, but the blood... There was so much blood. Evelyn pressed a cloth against the wound, applying pressure the way her mother had taught her. Come on, Cade. Don't you dare die on me. His eyes fluttered open. Evelyn, shut up. Save your strength. Tears were streaming down her face now, hot against her frozen cheeks. I'm going to get the bullet out. It's going to hurt. A lot. But I need you to stay conscious, okay? Can you do that? Cade's hand found hers squeezed weakly. Yeah. Evelyn poured whiskey over her hands, then over the wound. Cade's whole body jerked, a strangled sound escaping his throat. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Evelyn grabbed the knife from the medical kit, held it over the fire until the blade glowed,
then positioned it over the wound. This is going to be worse. I need you to hold still. She didn't give him time to prepare. She cut. Cade's scream tore through the cabin. His body arched off the floor, muscles rigid, and Evelyn had to use her weight to hold him down as she worked. The wound was deeper than she'd thought. The bullet had lodged near the bone. Her hands were slick with blood. The knife kept slipping, and Cade's screams turned into hoarse, broken sobs that made her chest feel like it was being ripped apart. "Almost there," she gasped. "Almost." The blade hit metal. Evelyn dropped the knife, grabbed the needle nose pliers from the kit, and slid them into the wound. Cade's scream cut off abruptly. His eyes rolled back. He'd passed out. Evelyn worked faster. She gripped the bullet, felt it shift, and pulled. It came free with a wet, horrible sound. She threw it aside, grabbed the needle and thread, and started stitching. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to stop twice to steady herself. The stitches were crude, uneven, but they held. When she finished, she wrapped the wound in clean bandages, tied them tight, and sat back on her heels. Cade's chest was still rising and falling. He was still breathing. Evelyn pressed her hands to her face and sobbed. For 3 days, Cade drifted in and out of consciousness. Fever set in on the second day. His skin burned to the touch, and he thrashed in his sleep, muttering words Evelyn couldn't understand. She kept cold compresses on his forehead, forced water between his lips when he woke, and changed the bandages every few hours. The wound wasn't infected, at least not yet, but it was bad. On the third night, his fever broke. Evelyn was dozing beside him, head resting on her arms, when she felt his hand on her shoulder. Her eyes snapped open. Cade was looking at her, pale and exhausted but conscious. "Hey," he said, voice rough. Evelyn's throat closed up. "Hey, you saved my life." "Don't." Evelyn's voice shook. "Don't thank me. You wouldn't have been out there if it weren't for me. That's not—" Cade stopped, coughed. Pain flickered across his face. "That's not true." "Then why were you out there?" Evelyn's eyes burned. "Why were you gone for so long? What were you doing?" Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I was looking for Rowan." Evelyn went still. "Your brother?" "He's in trouble." Cade's jaw tightened. "Got mixed up with the wrong people. Stagecoach robbery gang tied to Kern and the sheriff. Rowan didn't know what he was getting into. By the time he figured it out, it was too late." "So you've been protecting him?" "Trying to." Cade's voice was bitter. "The gang's been using him as a scapegoat. Every job they pull, they make sure Rowan's name gets attached to it. That way, if the law comes sniffing around, he takes the fall." Evelyn's chest tightened. "And you let people think you were the outlaw." Cade didn't answer, but the silence was answer enough. "That's why the town hates you," Evelyn said quietly. "That's why the sheriff wants you gone, because you know the truth." "Yeah." Cade's eyes closed. "And now they know I'm not backing down." "So they tried to kill you." "They'll try again." Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. "Then we leave. We take Rowan, and we go somewhere they can't find us." "There's nowhere they can't find us." Cade looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was bone deep. "This is the frontier, Evelyn. The law doesn't reach up here. Men like Kern and Hollister, they make the rules. And if you run, they just hunt you down." "Then what do we do?" Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We fight." Over the next week, Cade healed slowly. The wound was still painful, but the stitches held and the fever didn't return. He started moving around the cabin again, though Evelyn could see the way he favored his left side, the way his face went tight when he bent or twisted wrong. She didn't push him, but she didn't stop asking questions either. "Where's Rowan now?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "Hiding." Cade was sharpening his knife, the rhythmic scrape of steel on stone filling the silence. "There's a line shack about 10 miles east. He's been staying there, keeping his head down." "Have you seen him since you were shot?" "No." Cade's jaw tightened. "Can't risk leading Kern's men to him." "So he doesn't even know you're hurt." "He'll figure it out." Evelyn stared at him. "You're bleeding for him, nearly died for him, and he doesn't even know." "That's how it works." Cade didn't look up from the knife. "He's my brother. I protect him. End of story." "That's not—"
Evelyn stopped, took a breath. That's not fair to you. Life's not fair. I know that. Evelyn's voice was sharper now. But you're not responsible for his mistakes.
Yes, I am. Cade's eyes finally met hers, and there was something fierce in them. He's 22 years old. He's stupid and reckless, and he doesn't think before he acts. But he's still my brother, and I'm all he's got. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that Rowan needed to face the consequences of his choices, but she understood. Because if she'd had a sibling, if she'd had anyone left in the world who mattered, she would have done the same thing.
Okay, she said quietly. So what's the plan? Cade set the knife down. We need proof, something that ties Kern and Hollister to the robberies, something solid enough that the federal marshals can't ignore it. Where do we get proof? Rowan says there's a ledger. Hollister keeps it in his office. Records, every job, every cut, every payoff. Cade's voice was grim. If we can get that ledger, we can bring the whole operation down. And if we can't, then Rowan hangs and I probably hang with him. The words hung in the air, cold and final. Evelyn's chest tightened. Then we get the ledger. Cade looked at her. We? You think I'm letting you do this alone? Evelyn's voice was fierce. You can barely stand without wincing. You need help. Evelyn, don't. She leaned forward. Don't tell me it's too dangerous. Don't tell me I should stay here where it's safe. I'm done being protected. I'm done sitting on the sidelines. Cade stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay. Okay? Yeah. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're right. I need help. And you're the only person I trust. Evelyn's throat went tight. Trust. He trusted her. So what do we do? She asked. Cade picked up the knife again, tested the edge with his thumb. We get Rowan. We make a plan. And then we go to war. They left for the line shack 2 days later. The journey was brutal. The wound in Cade's side slowed him down, and the terrain was rough. Steep climbs, narrow trails, patches of ice that sent them sliding. Evelyn carried the rifle and most of the supplies, and by the time they reached the shack, her shoulders were screaming. The shack was barely standing. Logs rotting at the base, roof sagging in the middle, door hanging crooked on its hinges. But smoke rose from the chimney, and when Cade pushed the door open, a young man jumped to his feet, gun already in hand. Easy, Cade said. It's me. Rowan Grayson looked like a younger, less weathered version of his brother. Same dark hair, same gray eyes, but where Cade's face was hard and scarred, Rowan's was open and boyish. He couldn't have been older than 23. Jesus Christ, Cade. Rowan lowered the gun, eyes widening as he took in his brother's condition. What the hell happened to you? Kern's men ambushed me. Cade moved to the fire, lowered himself carefully onto a stool. Shot me near the ridge.
And you're just now telling me? Rowan's voice rose. You could have died out there. I didn't. Cade's tone was flat. Evelyn patched me up. Rowan's gaze swung to Evelyn standing in the doorway, and his expression shifted to something like surprise. You're the bride. Evelyn's jaw tightened. I'm Evelyn. Right, sorry. Rowan ran a hand through his hair. I didn't think you'd actually stay. Why wouldn't I?
Because most people run when they find out what Cade really is. Rowan's smile was bitter. Guess you're not most people. Evelyn glanced at Cade, saw the tension in his shoulders, and turned back to Rowan. No, I'm not. Rowan studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good. We're going to need all the help we can get. Cade leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me about the ledger. Rowan's expression darkened. Hollister keeps it in his office. Locked drawer, bottom left of his desk. He updates it after every job. How do you know? Because I saw him do it. Rowan's voice was tight. After the billing stage got hit, he called me into his office. Told me if I didn't keep my mouth shut, he'd make sure my name was the only one the marshals heard. Then he opened the drawer, wrote something down, and locked it again. Cade's jaw clenched. And you didn't think to mention this before? I was scared, okay? Rowan's voice cracked. These people don't play games, Cade. They've killed before. They'll kill again. Which is why we need that ledger. Cade stood, wincing. It's the only way to prove what they've been doing. So what's the plan? Rowan asked. Cade looked at Evelyn, then at his brother. We go to Black Hollow, we get the ledger, and we make sure Hollister and Kern can't hurt anyone ever again.
That's suicide, Rowan said flatly. Maybe. Cade's eyes were hard. But it's the only option we've got. The plan was simple. Rowan would create a distraction, start a fight at the saloon, draw Kern and his deputies out of the sheriff's office. Cade and Evelyn would slip in through the back, grab the ledger, and get out before anyone noticed. Simple. Except nothing about it felt simple.
They rode into Black Hollow just after sunset, when the streets were busy enough to provide cover but not so crowded they'd stand out. Evelyn kept her head down, hat pulled low, rifle hidden under her coat. Cade rode beside her, face grim, hand resting on his revolver. You remember the plan? He said quietly. In and out, no heroics. Evelyn's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. I remember. If something goes wrong, nothing's going to go wrong. Cade looked at her, and for a moment she saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for her. If it does, he said quietly, you run. You hear me? You don't wait for me. You don't try to help. You run, and you don't look back. Evelyn wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. Okay, she whispered. They tied the horses behind the general store and moved through the shadows toward the sheriff's office. Inside the saloon, Rowan's voice rose, loud and angry. Glass shattered. Men shouted. The distraction had started. Cade tested the back door of the sheriff's office. Locked. He pulled a thin piece of metal from his pocket, worked it into the lock, and after a few tense seconds, the mechanism clicked. The door swung open. Evelyn followed him inside, heart in her throat. The office was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a lamp on the desk. Cade moved to the desk, crouched down, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Locked. He swore under his breath, reached for the lockpick again. The front door opened. Evelyn's blood went cold. Footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Someone was in the office with them. Cade's hand went to his gun, but Evelyn grabbed his wrist, shook her head. If he fired, the whole town would hear. They had to stay hidden. The footsteps moved closer. Evelyn pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, and watched as a shadow fell across the floor. Deputy Kern stepped into the lamplight. He stopped, looked around. Then his gaze landed on the open back door. His hand dropped to his gun. I know you're here, Grayson, Kern said, voice cold. Come out, and maybe I won't kill you where you stand. Cade didn't move. Kern's eyes narrowed. Fine, have it your way. He drew his gun, and Evelyn stepped out from behind the desk, rifle raised. Drop it, she said. Kern's eyes widened, then he laughed. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not. Evelyn's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. Drop the gun, now. Kern's smile faded. You don't have the guts to pull that trigger, sweetheart. Try me. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Kern's gun hand twitched, and Cade exploded from the shadows. He hit Kern like a freight train, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. The gun flew from Kern's hand, skittered across the floor. Kern swung wildly. His fist connected with Cade's wounded side. Cade's face went white, but he didn't let go. He drove his knee into Kern's stomach, slammed his head against the wall once, twice, and the deputy crumpled. Cade staggered back, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped through his shirt. The stitches had torn. Cade, Evelyn started forward. The ledger, Cade gasped. Get the ledger. Evelyn grabbed the lockpick from the floor, jammed it into the drawer, and twisted. The lock gave. She yanked the drawer open, grabbed the leather-bound ledger inside, and shoved it under her coat. Got it. Let's go. They ran. Out the back door, through the alley, into the chaos of the street where Rowan was still fighting two men outside the saloon. Rowan! Cade shouted. Rowan looked up, saw them, and drove his elbow into the nearest man's face. Then he ran. They made it to the horses, mounted in a blur of movement, and rode. Behind them, shouts rose. Gunfire cracked. But they didn't stop. They rode into the darkness, into the mountains, and didn't look back. They didn't stop riding until the horses were spent and Cade was swaying in the saddle. Evelyn pulled her mare alongside his. We need to stop. You're bleeding again. We can't. Cade's voice was strained. They'll be coming after us. And they'll catch us if you pass out and fall off that horse. Evelyn grabbed his reins. There, that outcropping. We can take cover, rest for an hour. Rowan rode up beside them, face tight with worry. She's right. You look like hell, Cade. I'm fine. You're not fine. Evelyn's tone left no room for argument. You're bleeding through your shirt and you can barely sit straight. We stop. Now. Cade looked like he wanted to argue, but his body gave out before his stubbornness could. He nodded, just barely, and let Evelyn lead them toward the rocks. The outcropping provided decent shelter from the wind and hid them from the trail below. Evelyn helped Cade down from his horse, and he collapsed against the rock face, breathing hard. She pulled his coat open, lifted his shirt, and her stomach dropped. The bandages were soaked through. Blood seeped from the wound where the stitches had torn. His skin was pale, clammy. Rowan, I need the medical kit, Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady. Rowan dug through the saddlebags, found the kit, and handed it over. How bad?
Bad enough. Evelyn cut away the old bandages, examined the wound. 3 stitches had pulled free completely. I need to restitch it. Cade, can you hear me? His eyes were half closed. Yeah. This is going to hurt. Always does. Evelyn threaded the needle with shaking hands, no fire to sterilize it, no whiskey to numb the pain. Just her, the needle, and the wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. She worked quickly. Cade's jaw clenched so hard she thought his teeth might crack, but he didn't make a sound. Rowan held the lamp close, lighting the work, his face pale. When Evelyn tied off the last stitch, she wrapped fresh bandages around Cade's ribs and sat back on her heels. That'll hold, but you need real rest. Days, not hours. Don't have days? Cade's eyes opened, focused on her. They'll be tracking us. We need to keep moving. To where? Rowan asked. We can't go back to the cabin. That's the first place they'll look. Missoula. Cade pushed himself upright, wincing. There's a federal marshal stationed there. We get him the ledger. He'll have to act. That's 3 days' ride, Evelyn said. In your condition, I'll make it. Cade, I said I'll make it. His voice was hard, final. We don't have a choice, Evelyn. Either we get that ledger to Missoula, or everything we just did was for nothing. Evelyn wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him he was being reckless and stupid and he was going to get himself killed. But she could see it in his eyes. He knew the risks. He was taking them anyway. Because this wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. This was about Rowan. About stopping Hollister and Kern before they destroyed anyone else. Fine, Evelyn said quietly, but we do this smart. We rest here until first light, then we move. And if you start bleeding again, I won't. If you do, we stop. No arguments. Cade held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded. Evelyn stood, moved to where Rowan was tending the horses, and tried to ignore the fear clawing at her chest. Rowan glanced at her. He's always been like this, you know. Like what? Stubborn, reckless, willing to die for people who don't deserve it. Rowan's smile was bitter. I keep telling him to let me fix my own messes, but he won't listen. He loves you, Evelyn said simply. That's not something you can talk someone out of. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, he loves you too. Evelyn's breath caught. He hasn't said it, Rowan continued, but I can see it, the way he looks at you, the way he talks about you when you're not around. He met her eyes. My brother doesn't let people in. Ever. But he let you in. Evelyn's throat went tight. I don't know what I'm doing, Rowan. I came here thinking I was escaping one nightmare, and I walked straight into another, and now I'm in so deep I can't see a way out. You love him. It wasn't a question. Evelyn looked back at Cade, slumped against the rocks, exhausted and hurting, and still somehow ready to keep fighting. Yeah, she whispered. I do. Then that's enough. Rowan's voice was quiet. Because he's never had anyone fight for him before. Not the way you do. Evelyn wiped her eyes quickly, turned away before Rowan could see the tears. They couldn't afford weakness right now. They couldn't afford anything except survival. They rode out at dawn. Cade was pale but upright, gripping the reins with white-knuckled determination. Evelyn stayed close, watching for signs he was about to collapse. Rowan took point, leading them through narrow trails and hidden passes that kept them off the main roads. The first day passed without incident,
The second day, they spotted riders in the distance. How many? Cade's voice was low. Rowan shaded his eyes, counting. 4, maybe 5. Too far to tell if it's Kern's men. Assume it is. Cade turned his horse toward a dense section of forest. We go through the timber. Stay quiet. They pushed into the trees, branches scraping against their coats, horses picking their way carefully over fallen logs and hidden roots. Behind them, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder, then closer. Evelyn's heart hammered. She glanced back, saw movement through the trees. The riders were following them. Cade, she hissed. I know. His jaw was tight. Keep moving. Don't stop. They urged the horses faster, weaving through the trees, trying to put distance between themselves and the pursuit. But the riders were gaining. Rowan pulled his horse alongside Cade's. There's a gorge up ahead. Bitter Gorge. If we can make it across the bridge before they catch us, then we blow the bridge, Cade finished. Cut off pursuit. That's insane, Evelyn said. What if we don't make it across in time? Then we fight. Cade's eyes were hard. Either way, we're not letting them take that ledger. They broke from the trees onto a narrow trail that hugged the edge of a massive gorge. The drop was dizzying, hundreds of feet straight down to jagged rocks and a ribbon of white water below. The bridge was ahead. Old, wooden, held together with rope and hope. Behind them, gunfire cracked. A bullet whined past Evelyn's head. Go, Cade shouted. They spurred the horses onto the bridge. The wood groaned under their weight, swaying violently. Evelyn gripped the reins so hard her hands ached, eyes fixed on the far side. Halfway across, Rowan's horse stumbled. The bridge lurched. Rowan grabbed for the rope railing, and for one horrible moment Evelyn thought he was going to fall. But he held on, righted himself, kept moving. They made it to the far side just as the riders reached the bridge. Cade dismounted, pulled a knife from his belt, and started sawing at the ropes holding the bridge in place. Cade, they're coming! Evelyn's voice rose. I know! The first rope snapped. The bridge sagged. Rowan, the other side! Rowan jumped down, ran to the opposite anchor point, and started cutting. The riders were on the bridge now, shouting, urging their horses forward. The second rope snapped. The bridge tilted violently. One of the horses reared, panicked. Its rider fell, crashed through the rotten wood, and plummeted into the gorge, screaming. The other riders tried to turn back, but it was too late. Rowan severed the last rope. The bridge collapsed. Men and horses tumbled into the void, their screams cutting off abruptly as they hit the rocks below. Evelyn turned away, stomach heaving. Cade stood at the edge, breathing hard, watching the wreckage. Then he turned, grabbed the reins of his horse, and mounted. Let's go. They rode in silence for the next hour. Evelyn's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She kept seeing the men falling, kept hearing their screams. She'd never watched anyone die before. You okay? Rowan's voice was quiet. Evelyn shook her head. No. First time's the hardest. There shouldn't be a first time. Her voice cracked. I shouldn't have to watch people die. This whole thing, it's insane. I know. Rowan looked away. And it's my fault. If I hadn't been stupid enough to get involved with those men, it's not your fault. Evelyn's voice was fiercer than she intended. Hollister and Kern, they're the ones running this. They're the ones who shot Cade, who tried to kill us. You made a mistake, but they're the monsters. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Thank you. For what? For not hating me. Evelyn looked at him, young, scared, trying so hard to be brave, and felt something shift in her chest. Your family, she said quietly. I don't hate family. Rowan's eyes went bright. He looked away quickly, but Evelyn saw the emotion there. They reached Missoula 2 days later, exhausted and hungry and barely holding together. Cade had made it, but just barely. He was running on willpower alone, his face gray, his movements slow and careful. Evelyn had rewrapped his wound 3 times during the journey, and each time there was less blood, but she knew he was reaching his limit. The federal marshal's office was a small building on the edge of town, marked by a weathered sign and an American flag hanging limp in the still air. They tied the horses outside and walked in. The marshal was a lean man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression. He looked up from his desk as they entered, took in their appearance, dirty, bloodied, armed, and his hand moved toward the gun at his hip. Easy, Cade said. We're not here to cause trouble. Then what are you here for? The marshal's voice was flat. Evelyn pulled the ledger from inside her coat and set it on the desk. We're here to report corruption in Black Hollow. Sheriff William Hollister and Deputy Marcus Kern have been running a stagecoach robbery operation for the past 2 years. This ledger contains records of every job, every payment, and every name involved. The marshal's eyes flicked to the ledger, then back to them. And who are you? I'm Cade Grayson. This is my brother Rowan and my wife Evelyn. Cade's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. Hollister's been framing my brother for the robberies. They tried to kill me when I started asking questions. We stole this ledger from Hollister's office 3 days ago. The marshal opened the ledger, scanned the pages, and his expression darkened. This is detailed, he said slowly. Dates, locations, amounts stolen, names of everyone involved. He looked up. If this is real, it's real, Rowan said. I was there for half of these jobs. Hollister forced me to participate, then threatened to pin everything on me if I talked. The marshal studied Rowan for a long moment. Then he closed the ledger and stood. I'm going to need statements from all 3 of you, and then I'm riding to Black Hollow with a warrant for Hollister's arrest. He won't come quietly, Cade said. I don't expect him to. The marshal's smile was grim. But that ledger gives me enough ammunition to bring in federal backup. Hollister's reign is over. Relief crashed over Evelyn so hard her knees nearly buckled. It was over. They'd done it. The marshal took their statements, locked the ledger in his safe, and arranged for them to stay at a boarding house while he assembled a team to ride to Black Hollow. Evelyn helped Cade up the stairs to their room, got him into bed, and redressed his wound one more time. You need a real doctor, she said quietly. I'll see one tomorrow. Cade's eyes were already closing. Right now I just need sleep. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, watching him. His breathing evened out. The tension in his face eased. For the first time in weeks, he looked peaceful. She reached out, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, and whispered, I love you. Cade's eyes opened. Evelyn froze. You weren't supposed to hear that, she said quickly. Cade's hand found hers, squeezed gently. I love you too. Evelyn's breath caught. You don't have to. I'm not saying it because I have to. Cade's voice was rough, but certain. I'm saying it because it's true. You saved my life, Evelyn, more than once. And somewhere along the way, you became the only thing that matters. Tears burned Evelyn's eyes. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Love someone like this. Love someone so much it terrifies me. Cade pulled her down beside him, wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Then we'll figure it out together. Evelyn pressed her face against his chest and let herself cry. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, from relief. Because for the first time since she'd stepped off that stagecoach in Black Hollow, she wasn't alone anymore. The marshal rode out 2 days later with 6 federal deputies and a warrant for Sheriff Hollister's arrest. Cade wanted to go with them. Evelyn refused to let him. You can barely walk without wincing, she said flatly. You're staying here. Evelyn, no. Her voice was sharp. You've done enough. Let the marshals handle it. Rowan sided with Evelyn, and together they managed to keep Cade in Missoula while the law rode north. They waited 3 days. On the 4th day, the marshal returned. He walked into the boarding house looking exhausted but satisfied, and when he saw them waiting in the common room, he nodded. It's done. Hollister and Kern are in custody. We arrested 6 others tied to the operation. The rest scattered, but we'll track them down. What about the charges against Rowan? Cade asked. Dropped. The marshal pulled a document from his coat. Based on his cooperation and the evidence in the ledger, the territorial judge signed a full pardon. Rowan Grayson is a free man. Rowan's face went white. Then he laughed, a choked, disbelieving sound. I'm free? You're free. Evelyn grabbed Rowan's hand, squeezed hard, and he squeezed back. The marshal turned to Cade. There's something else. Hollister tried to make a deal. Said if we let him go, he'd give us information about you. Cade's expression didn't change. What kind of information? Said you killed 2 men in a mining camp 5 years ago. Said there's still a warrant out for your arrest. Evelyn's stomach dropped, but the marshal shook his head. I looked into it. Those men were wanted for murder. You killed them in self-defense. The warrant was issued by a corrupt judge who's since been removed from office. As far as the federal government is concerned, you're clean.
Kate exhaled slowly. So it's over. It's over. The marshal extended his hand. You did a good thing, bringing us that ledger. This territory's a little safer because of you. Cade shook his hand. Thank you. The marshal tipped his hat to Evelyn, nodded to Rowan, and left. The three of them stood in the common room, silent. Then Rowan said, I need a drink. Cade laughed, actually laughed, and clapped his brother on the shoulder. Yeah, me too. They found a quiet saloon on the edge of town and ordered whiskey. Evelyn didn't drink, someone needed to stay sober in case Cade reopened his wound, but she sat with them, listening as they talked. Really talked, for the first time since she'd met them. Rowan told stories about growing up with Cade, about the trouble they'd gotten into as kids, about their parents who died when Rowan was 12. Cade told stories about the war, about the mountains, about the first winter he'd spent alone in the cabin thinking he'd lose his mind from the silence. And Evelyn told them about New York, about her father, her stepmother, the life she'd left behind. By the time they left the saloon, the sun was setting, and Evelyn felt lighter than she had in months. That night, Cade pulled her aside in the hallway of the boarding house. I need to ask you something, he said. Evelyn's heart skipped. Okay. When we got married, the proxy marriage, it wasn't real, not really. You didn't choose me. You chose survival. Cade, let me finish. His eyes were serious. I want to give you a choice now. A real one. You can walk away. Go back east, start over, live whatever life you want. Or, he took a breath. Or you can stay. Marry me for real. Build a life here. With me. Evelyn stared at him. Then she laughed. Cade's face fell. That's not the reaction I was hoping for. I'm not laughing at you. Evelyn stepped closer, took his hands. I'm laughing because you think I'd ever choose to leave. You might, once you have had time to think about what staying means. I know what it means. Evelyn's voice was fierce. It means winters in the mountains. It means hard work and danger and never knowing what's coming next. It means being with a man who's stubborn and reckless and doesn't know how to ask for help. And I don't care. Because it also means being with the only person who's ever made me feel like I matter. Cade's throat worked. Evelyn, I'm staying, Cade. Not because I don't have other options, but because I don't want other options. I want you. Cade pulled her into his arms, buried his face in her hair, and held on like he was afraid she'd disappear. Marry me, he whispered, for real this time. Yes. They were married a week later in a small church on the outskirts of Missoula. No guests except Rowan and the minister. No fancy dress or flowers. Just Evelyn in a simple blue gown she'd bought from a seamstress in town, and Cade in clean clothes that didn't have bloodstains. When the minister asked if she took Cade Grayson to be her husband, Evelyn didn't hesitate. I do. And when Cade kissed her, it felt like coming home. After the ceremony, they stood outside the church in the fading sunlight, and Rowan raised a flask. To new beginnings, he said. Cade took the flask, drank, and passed it to Evelyn. She took a sip. Whiskey burned her throat, and handed it back. What are you going to do now? She asked Rowan. Head west. Maybe California. Start over somewhere nobody knows my name. Rowan smiled. What about you two? Cade looked at Evelyn. We're going back to the cabin. You sure? After everything that happened, it's home, Cade said simply. And we're not running anymore. Rowan nodded. Then I guess this is goodbye. For now. Cade pulled his brother into a rough hug. Stay out of trouble. I'll try. Rowan stepped back, looked at Evelyn. Take care of him. I will. Rowan mounted his horse, tipped his hat, and rode west toward whatever future waited for him. Cade and Evelyn watched until he disappeared into the distance. Then they turned toward the mountains, toward home. The cabin looked different when they returned. Not physically. It was still the same rough-hewn logs, the same stone chimney, the same narrow windows, but something had shifted. Evelyn stood in the clearing, breathing in the cold mountain air, and realized what it was. Fear. The fear was gone. The first time she'd seen this place, it had felt like a prison. Now it felt like the only place in the world she wanted to be. Cade dismounted slowly, still favoring his wounded side, and looked at her. You okay? Evelyn smiled.
Yeah, I'm okay. They spent the next week settling back in. Cade's wound was healing, finally, though he still moved carefully, and Evelyn caught him wincing when he thought she wasn't looking. She changed his bandages every morning, checked for infection, and refused to let him do any heavy work until the stitches came out. He grumbled about it, but he listened. Evelyn restocked the supplies, organized the cabin properly, and started making plans for spring. They'd need to plant a garden if they were going to stay year-round, fix the roof where it leaked, maybe build an addition if... She stopped herself, one step at a time. On the 8th day, someone knocked on the door. Cade grabbed his rifle, moved to the window, and peered out. Then his shoulders relaxed. It's just a kid. Evelyn opened the door. A boy stood in the clearing, maybe 12 years old, wearing clothes too thin for the cold. He clutched a folded piece of paper in one hand and looked terrified. "Mr. Grayson?" His voice cracked. "That's me." Cade stepped into the doorway. "What do you want?" "I'm supposed to give you this." The boy thrust the paper forward. "Man in town paid me $2 to bring it up here." Cade took the paper, unfolded it, and his expression darkened. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. Cade handed her the note without a word. The handwriting was neat, precise. "Mr. Grayson, your interference has cost me considerably. Sheriff Hollister was a valuable asset, and your actions have disrupted a lucrative operation. However, I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to let this matter rest, provided you and your wife leave Montana within the month. If you choose to stay, I will consider it a declaration of war. The choice is yours. T. Mercer." Evelyn's blood went cold. Thomas. Her stepbrother had found her. "How?" Her voice came out hoarse. "How did he know where I was?" Cade's jaw was tight. "Probably hired investigators, tracked the marriage certificate, followed the trail." He looked at the boy. "Who gave you this note?" "Man at the hotel in Missoula. Fancy suit, gray hair. Said his name was Mercer." "Was anyone with him?" The boy nodded. "Another man. Older, real rich looking. They were asking about you in town, offering money for information." Evelyn's hands shook. "Jonathan Aldridge. He came with Thomas." Cade's eyes went hard. "Go inside." "Cade." "Go inside, Evelyn." His voice was flat, controlled, dangerous. Evelyn grabbed his arm. "You're not going down there. You're still hurt, and if they're looking for a fight, then I'll give them one." Cade pulled free. "They threatened you. That means they're threatening me, and I don't let threats stand." "This is exactly what they want." Evelyn's voice rose. "They want you to ride down there angry and reckless so they can claim self-defense when they kill you." Cade stared at her. "So what do you suggest?" "We ignore it." Evelyn's hands clenched. "We stay here. We don't engage. And if they try to come up the mountain, we're ready." "They won't come up the mountain." Cade's tone was grim. "Men like that don't get their hands dirty. They hire people to do it for them. Then we deal with whoever they hire." Evelyn stepped closer. "But we do it smart. Together, not you charging down there alone like some what? Like some hero in a story where the hero always dies in the third act." Cade's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "You think I'm a hero?" "I think you're an idiot who's going to get himself killed if he's not careful." Evelyn's voice softened. "Please, Cade, don't give them what they want." Cade looked at the note again, then at the boy still standing nervously in the clearing. He pulled a coin from his pocket and tossed it to the kid. "Get out of here, and if anyone asks, you never saw us." The boy caught the coin, nodded, and ran. Cade turned back to Evelyn. "We're not running. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to think." "I am thinking." Cade's voice was quiet but fierce. "I'm thinking about what happens if we let men like Thomas Mercer and Jonathan Aldridge believe they can threaten people and get away with it. I'm thinking about every person they'll hurt if someone doesn't stand up to them. And I'm thinking about the fact that I just got you back alive." Evelyn's voice cracked. "I'm not losing you to some rich bastard's ego." Cade pulled her into his arms, held her tight. "You're not losing me. You can't promise that." "No." He pressed his forehead to hers. "But I can promise I'll fight like hell to come back." Evelyn closed her eyes. "I hate this." "I know." They stood there in the cold, holding each other until the sun started to set.
Then Cade said, "We're going to Missoula, but we're going together, and we're doing this the right way." "What's the right way?" "We make them regret ever coming west." They rode into Missoula 2 days later. Evelyn had insisted on coming, and Cade had stopped arguing after the first hour. They left the rifles at the cabin but kept knives hidden in their boots and a revolver tucked into Cade's coat, just in case. The hotel where Thomas and Aldridge were staying was the nicest building in town, 3 stories, painted white, with a balcony overlooking the main street. Cade tied the horses outside and looked at Evelyn. "Last chance to stay out here." "Not happening." They walked in together. The lobby was all polished wood and expensive rugs. A clerk stood behind the desk, looking bored until he saw them. His eyes widened, probably at the state of their clothes, still rough and trail-worn, but he plastered on a professional smile. "Can I help you?" "We're here to see Thomas Mercer," Evelyn said. "Room number?" "I'm afraid I can't give out that information." "Room 12," a voice said from the stairs. Evelyn turned. Thomas Mercer stood on the landing, impeccably dressed in a gray suit, looking exactly the way she remembered, smug, calculating, cruel. Beside him stood Jonathan Aldridge, older, heavier, with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Hello, Evelyn." Thomas descended the stairs slowly. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough." Evelyn's voice was ice. Thomas's gaze slid to Cade, assessed him like a piece of livestock. "So this is the mountain man. I have to say I'm disappointed. I expected someone more impressive." Cade didn't react. Aldridge stepped forward. "Miss Mercer, this has gone on long enough. You've had your little adventure, but it's time to come home." "I am home." Evelyn's hands clenched. "And my name is Grayson now." "That proxy marriage is invalid," Thomas said smoothly. "I've already contacted my lawyers. We can have it annulled within the week." "It's not invalid. We were married again, legally, in front of witnesses." Thomas's smile didn't waver. "Then we'll challenge it. Claim coercion, mental incompetence, whatever it takes." "You can't—" "I can do whatever I want, Evelyn." Thomas's voice hardened. "Father left you in my care. That means your decisions are mine to make until you're 25. And I've decided you're coming back to New York to marry Mr. Aldridge as originally planned." Cade spoke for the first time. "She's not going anywhere." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Mr. Grayson." "She's my wife. That makes it my concern." "Your wife?" Aldridge's laugh was ugly. "You really think a legal document gives you ownership? Evelyn is a lady. She deserves better than some illiterate trapper living in the wilderness." "I can read just fine," Cade said quietly. "And I never claimed to own her, unlike you." Aldridge's face flushed. "You insolent!" "Enough." Thomas held up a hand. "Mr. Grayson, let me make this simple. I'm offering you $5,000 to walk away. Sign the annulment papers, disappear back into your mountains, and never contact Evelyn again." "No." "10,000. "No." Thomas's smile thinned. "Everyone has a price." "Not me." Cade's voice was flat. "You can't buy me. You can't threaten me, and you sure as hell can't take her." "Can I?" Thomas stepped closer. "I have lawyers, money, connections. What do you have? A cabin and a reputation as an outlaw?" "I have the truth." Cade pulled a folded document from his coat. "Federal pardon, signed by a territorial judge. I'm not an outlaw, Mercer. I'm a law-abiding citizen who just helped bring down a corrupt sheriff. And I've got friends in the marshal's office who'd be real interested to hear about 2 men from New York threatening a resident of Montana." Thomas's expression darkened. Aldridge stepped forward. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm stating facts." Cade's eyes were cold. "You came here thinking you could intimidate us, thinking we'd roll over because you've got money and lawyers. But this isn't New York. Out here, money doesn't mean as much as you think. And if you try to hurt Evelyn, if you even think about it, I'll make sure you regret it." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Thomas said very quietly, "You're making a mistake, Mr. Grayson." "Wouldn't be my first." Thomas turned to Evelyn. "Last chance. Come back with us now, and we'll forget this ever happened. Stay with him, and I'll make sure you never see a penny of Father's estate. You'll be cut off, disowned, You'll have nothing. Evelyn looked at Thomas, at the man she'd once called family, and felt nothing but pity. I already have everything I need, she said quietly. And it's not money. Thomas's face twisted. You're a fool. Maybe. Evelyn took Cade's hand. But I'm a fool on my own terms. She turned and walked out. Cade followed. Behind them, Thomas's voice rang out, sharp with fury. You'll regret this, Evelyn, both of you. Cade stopped in the doorway, looked back. The only thing I regret is not being there the day someone finally puts you in your place. Then he shut the door. Outside, Evelyn's legs nearly gave out. Cade caught her, held her steady. You okay? I don't know. Her voice shook. I can't believe I did that. You were incredible. I was terrified. So was I. Cade's smile was faint. But we did it. Together. Evelyn looked up at him, saw the pride in his eyes, and felt something break open in her chest. She'd spent her whole life being told what to do, who to marry, how to behave. For the first time, she'd made a choice that was entirely hers, and it felt like freedom. They stayed in Missoula for another 3 days, waiting to see if Thomas would make good on his threats. He didn't. On the morning of the 4th day, the hotel clerk told them that Thomas and Aldridge had checked out during the night, left town without a word. Cade didn't believe it at first. They just left? Packed their bags and rode out before dawn. The clerk shrugged. Good riddance, if you ask me. Those two were nothing but trouble. Evelyn exhaled slowly. It's over, maybe. Cade's expression was cautious. Or maybe they're regrouping. Either way, they're gone, for now. Evelyn took his hand. Let's go home. They rode back to the cabin as winter started to break. The snow was melting. Streams ran high with meltwater. And for the first time since Evelyn had arrived in Montana, she could see green pushing up through the mud. Spring was coming. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Cade taught Evelyn how to track game, how to read the weather, how to survive if she ever got separated from him in the wilderness. Evelyn taught Cade how to cook something other than boiled meat, how to mend clothes so they actually stayed mended, how to organize supplies so they didn't run out midwinter. They argued sometimes. Evelyn had a temper, and Cade was stubborn as a mule. But they learned how to fight without cruelty, how to apologize when they were wrong, how to forgive when it mattered. And slowly, the cabin stopped being just a shelter. It became a home. One evening in late spring, Evelyn was outside checking the garden when she heard hoofbeats. Her heart jumped. She grabbed the rifle from inside the door and moved to the edge of the clearing. A rider appeared through the trees, Rowan. Evelyn lowered the rifle, relief flooding through her. You scared me half to death. Rowan dismounted, grinning. Sorry, didn't mean to. He looked around. Where's Cade? Checking the trap lines. He'll be back before dark. Evelyn studied him. You look good. California treating you well? It's all right. Rowan's smile faded. Actually, I'm not staying. Just passing through on my way to Oregon. Thought I'd stop and see how you two were doing. We're doing fine. Evelyn gestured toward the cabin. Come inside, I'll make coffee. They sat at the table, and Rowan told her about California, the jobs he'd worked, the people he'd met, the trouble he'd managed to avoid. Sounds like you're doing better, Evelyn said. Yeah. Rowan looked down at his hands. Turns out when you're not constantly running from the law, life gets a lot easier. I'm glad. They were quiet for a moment. Then Rowan said, How's Cade? Really? He's good. The wound healed clean. He's been working on expanding the cabin, talking about building a barn next year. He's planning for the future. Rowan's smile was soft. That's new. He's different now. Evelyn's voice was quiet. Lighter, somehow, like he finally let go of something he'd been carrying for too long. He let go of the past. Rowan met her eyes. Because of you. Evelyn's throat tightened. I think we saved each other. Yeah. Rowan nodded. I think you did. When Cade returned that evening and found Rowan sitting at his table, his face split into the widest smile Evelyn had ever seen. The brothers embraced, clapped each other on the back, and spent the night trading stories and drinking whiskey by the fire. Evelyn watched them, heart full, and thought about how much had changed.
6 months ago, she'd been a terrified woman fleeing a forced marriage. Now she was sitting in a cabin in the mountains, watching her husband laugh with his brother, and feeling more at peace than she'd ever felt in her life. Rowan left the next morning. He hugged Evelyn, told her to take care of his brother, and rode north toward whatever future waited for him. Cade stood beside Evelyn, watching until Rowan disappeared into the trees. "Think we'll see him again?" Evelyn asked. "Yeah." Cade's voice was certain. "He'll come back. They always do." Spring turned to summer. Evelyn's garden flourished. Cade built a small barn and started talking about getting chickens. They made trips to town every few weeks for supplies, and slowly, the people of Black Hollow stopped crossing the street when they saw them. The fear was fading. One afternoon in late summer, Evelyn was working in the garden when she felt Cade's arms wrap around her from behind. She leaned back against his chest. "You're supposed to be fixing the fence." "Fence can wait." His voice was warm against her ear. "I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "I'm happy." Evelyn turned in his arms, looked up at him. "Yeah?" "Yeah." Cade's eyes were soft. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that, but I am, because of you." Evelyn's vision blurred. "I'm happy too." They stood there in the sunlight, holding each other, and Evelyn realized something. She'd spent her whole life looking for safety. But safety wasn't a place. It wasn't money or status or a comfortable house in New York. Safety was this: being with someone who saw all your broken pieces and loved you anyway. Someone who fought for you. Someone who chose you every single day. Cade Grayson was the most dangerous man in the Montana wilderness, and he was the safest place Evelyn had ever known. 5 years later, the cabin had grown. An addition on the east side gave them 2 more rooms. The barn housed chickens, 2 cows, and a horse for their son to learn to ride. The garden was bigger, more organized, and produced enough food to get them through the winters. Evelyn stood on the porch, watching as their 4-year-old son chased the chickens around the yard, shrieking with laughter. He had Cade's dark hair in her eyes, and he was fearless in the way only children raised in the wilderness could be. Cade walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "He's going to terrorize those birds." "Let him," Evelyn smiled. "He'll tire himself out." They stood together, watching their son play, and Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been when she first arrived. Scared, desperate, alone. She wasn't that woman anymore. She'd learned to survive in the wilderness, learned to fight when necessary, learned to love without fear, and she'd learned that sometimes the best choices were the ones that looked like mistakes at first. "You ever regret it?" Cade asked quietly. "Coming here?" "Not once." "Even when things were hard?" "Especially when things were hard." Evelyn turned in his arms, looked up at him. "Hard things make you stronger, and I needed to be strong." Cade kissed her forehead. "You were always strong. You just didn't know it yet." "Neither did you." He smiled. "Fair point." Their son ran up to the porch, breathless and grinning. "Papa, can we ride down to the creek?" Cade crouched down. "After lunch." "Deal?" "Deal!" The boy ran back to the chickens. Evelyn watched him go, heart full. People in town still told stories about Cade Grayson, the mountain man, the trapper, the legend. But the stories had changed. Now they talked about the Grayson family, about the ranch in the valley, about the woman who'd come from New York and tamed the wildest man in Montana. Evelyn laughed every time she heard that version. She hadn't tamed anything. She just loved a man who'd forgotten how to be loved, and he'd loved her back with a fierceness that still took her breath away. That evening, after their son was asleep, Evelyn and Cade sat on the porch watching the stars. "You know what I realized today?" Evelyn said. "What?" "I don't think about New York anymore. Not really. It's like that whole life belonged to someone else." Cade took her hand. "Any regrets?" "Just one." He looked at her, concerned. "What?" Evelyn smiled. "I wish I could go back and tell that scared girl on the stagecoach that everything was going to be okay, that the monster everyone warned her about was actually the best thing that ever happened to her." Cade's eyes went bright. He pulled her close, kissed her slowly. "I love you." "I love you too." They sat together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the mountain, and Evelyn thought about how strange life was. She'd fled one nightmare only to stumble into another. But somewhere along the way, the nightmare had turned into a dream, and the dream had turned into home. The most dangerous man in the wilderness had become her safe place, and she'd become his. That, Evelyn thought, was the only truth that mattered.